All right, all. I think that's a good number that's here. We're just going to go ahead and start. Welcome to City Lights Live, everyone. It's the virtual reading series that is continuing in the footsteps of our store event calendar during the COVID-19 lockdown. We're going to continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with virtual readings, discussions, and forums throughout the month of May and into June. Please visit us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, all the usuals. You can visit the City Lights website and please subscribe to our newsletter. That's where you can find out about upcoming events. Books for tonight's event are available through the link we've posted. It should be up here in the chat here pretty soon. It's a link to our bookshop portal. Bookshop's an amazing website for books in these times. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly suggest you do. Tonight, we are delighted to be celebrating a prose debut that weaves together memoir and theory into a poetic meditation on family, growing up, gender, sorrow, and language. It's at times tender, at times exhilarating. It's a work of great emotional force and intellectual prowess. We're delighted to have with us tonight Emerson Whitney. They are the author of the poetry collection Ghost Box from Timeless Infinite Light Press. They also teach in the BFA Creative Writing Program at Goddard College and are the Dana and David Dornsife Teaching Postdoctoral Fellow at the University of Southern California. The new book is called Heaven. It is published by our friends over at McSweeney's. Tonight is going to be, your kind of usual thing. We're going to begin with Emerson reading passages from their books, the new book, Heaven. Afterwards, we're going to be taking questions. How that's going to work. If you have a question, please just post it to the chat box. I'm going to be copying that down, and then I will ask Emerson questions at the end. And now, without further ado, it is a pleasure now to welcome Emerson Whitney. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Caitlyn. So appreciative to be at the virtual City Lights, and City Lights has always meant a lot to me as just such a wonderful place and press. And so, yeah, I'm honored to be here, and thank you for hosting my read of this book, which I really deeply love so much. And so I'm just honored to share with everyone right now. And thanks to all of those of you who are joining us. So yeah. Thank you. Mom was sweaty, and the one lamp at her side lit the sweat. The light was making shadows that looked like children. She pulled the sheets up to her chin, shut her eyes. A ruddy, unshaven Texan skulked around. His belly hung over his pants. He was looking out one of the windows behind her bed, shaking a fist at her in his mind. Mom sunk deeper into the mattress, her arms folded over her chest. The man pacing by the bed waved an open Bible at her. She didn't take it. She wasn't sure who he was, why she was barely clothed in bed, why there was a brace around her rib cage, a plastic ID band on her wrist, why it was so hot, so cold, why the sun had already set. She didn't understand this part. He found her with a few broken ribs and a bloodshot eye. Her head leaned against the steering wheel. A thin, blonde woman with little wrists and small hoop earrings, vodka bottles clinking in the well beneath the driver's seat. She looked expensive. He carried her like a blanket back to his bed. His mother, a cherry-faced German Texan, came over to watch. This was old Texas, like in the movies. The delirium tremens in Texas, where dip tins make circles in everybody's back pocket. The old woman watched over her like she would a snake, a fire, as if she were on a porch or in a breezeway and not in a humid room, watching a rich-looking white woman shake herself almost to death. The cherry-faced woman knitted in a broken chair next to the bed. This went on for almost 10 days, cicadas crowing, bluebells popping up. I like this story, the story of these strangers watching my mom, doing my job. I imagined it. I wasn't there. At the time, I didn't know where she was. We hadn't spoken. I'd been everywhere by then. She was still in Dallas. At least I figured she was. I told myself I couldn't give a shit less. Mom's probably dead or dying, I'd say, and this was true, at least mostly. She scared me. Loving her scared me. Eventually, I heard pieces of this story and invented the rest. She was in Texas. There was some guy. There were broken ribs. I had cut off all contact, was on my own. I didn't care about her anymore, I'd say. I already grieved. But then I began to get phone calls from relatives saying she was skidding, maybe to a stop. She wasn't well. I had started falling, sliding somewhere myself. Everything I fear in her lives hot inside of me. Ask me about my mother now, and I'll answer you with a question. Which of these are my words? I will be at Walmart this afternoon, going to the Tractor Supply and McDonald's for my B-day. Haha, you gotta love the simple life. We have another nor'easter coming. Can we talk tomorrow? I have the day off, and I'm using it to train Kitty to pee and poop in the toilet. Sometime after the broken ribs and the guy with the Bible, she moved into a camper parked on the periphery of a graveyard. The camper was 70s style with white plastic paneling and a red racing stripe. It was pulled under a group of poplar trees, which leaned heavy across an ornate wrought iron fence and scratched the roof. When she'd walked outside on her way anywhere, she'd squish across repotted grass, over blown headstones that her boyfriend was supposed to fix. Every day, she checked her teeth in a tiny mirror over her stove, poured a cup of coffee, and stepped outside. The camper door slapped. She walked into town through the tourists, through the side door to the inn where she worked. She took this walk 6 days a week with her head down, wiping her hands on her apron, the skin of her palms peeled off, peeling from bleaching bathtubs and sinks. My mother looks like a woman from New York City anyway, even with broken skin. She's proud of a gap in her teeth where she didn't pay for a new tooth, where she gums at watery candy now, she says. Her shoulders and hands are torn up, but the fan of her neck is always powdered or moisturized or whatever it is. Her hair is always newly dyed. Her face peeks out from the freshness of it. Her hands are mostly clasped in her lap, her eyes darting all around. When I was little, I'd twist her hair around my hand and hold it. She'd put her head in my stomach, knees pressed into the linoleum, wearing jeans and a gray sweatshirt with the elastic worn out. She'd make wet streaks on my shirt, sobbing so her head bounced against my stomach, wild and hard, her nose running down. I'd put my hands on the back of her head. She'd whimper. I'd hold her hair. I'd miss her so much, even though she was right there, miss her like a sheath. Her blue eyes would beat into mine. A tear would kick off my face and onto her head. Mom would see it, reach up and touch it. I'm going to do just a little bit more of this, and then maybe we can hear from you, or this part. Maybe we can hear from you a little bit. All right. I used to watch Mom on TV. I would pull the videos out of the back of the cupboard while I was homesick as a teenager. They were in green VHS sleeves in the way back. I don't know where they are now, and it doesn't matter because nobody has a VCR. A blonde man and woman sat forward in heavy floral chairs. They chatted, glanced at the camera from the foreground of a pastel painting of Sacramento, the woman's shoulder pads blotting out the American River. The woman turned to face the camera. She said, "Marie." A craft scene backdrop slapped on the screen, a blue wall. The camera panned to Mom behind a brown table filled with scraps of things, paper. She was perfect and 80s, had giant red glasses. She blinked at the camera, held up a cutout of my image that she'd made into a lampshade. I was adorable as a lampshade, was 4-something years old. I know that's my friend Sherry's favorite part, I think, and she's here, so that's for you, Sherry. In the photo Mom was holding, I wore overalls and a pink baseball cap. My hands were in my pockets. I looked a little pissed. She was saying something about my dad, said dad flatly, and I was surprised to hear it. She showed the audience how to make a calendar for kids to understand visitation when their parents were divorced. She moved the cutout of me to Monday, Wednesday. I never saw Dad like she was talking about. We didn't have a schedule and we didn't live close. She talked about me and explained decoupage. Her hair was clipped behind her head, glasses leaning off her nose. Beautiful. She made perfect sense. When the show was live, I'd watch it from the car seat in the living room. I was 4, the shadow of a palm tree moving across the floor. I rocked in the car seat with my arms crossed. There was nothing in the room, just foam green carpet and a bucket of paint at the entry to the kitchen, white paint that smelled empty. I don't know why there was only a car seat. All those times that Mom's face was center on TV, I waited for her wave. I'd watch her voice, her body projecting, moving onto its toes. She'd hold her elbow up and smile at the studio audience. I'd wave back. Music would come on, synthy music about Sacramento. The crush of light in the living room would make the screen too white. Her face and her waving would careen off into an advertisement, leave the echo of her voice in the room like paint. I'd push myself out of the car seat, pad into the kitchen, tip a chair on its back 2 legs, and drag it toward the refrigerator. I always used the same chair, the one with the loose cushion, tan and wrinkled. I'd hoist myself onto the seat, always an inch or two too short to be eye level with the top. I'd open the fridge and lodge my foot between the interior racks and use that fulcrum to pull my pacifier off the fridge, the blue one, the one with the elephant on the tip. They stuck it up there so I'd stop sucking on it. I'd stand on the chair totally triumphant, shove it into my mouth with both hands, smile behind it. When I was an infant, I'd put my mouth around my mom's actual nipple and my face would fill with snot. A red pimply ring would grow where my mouth was. I gave Mom mastitis, was allergic to her milk. I was allergic to formula too, to everything. I coughed. My younger brothers drank her up. When she'd come into the house, they'd feel her breasts arriving. They'd shriek and run toward her legs. I'd hang back. Her smell would rush at me anyway. Light would shift in the house. Mom's voice flickered against the clicking on of lamps. Here's the etymology. Mammary is a word that's likely derived from a natural sound in baby talk, perhaps imitative of a sound made while sucking, ma. The ache of wanting is enormous. I drank off the plug like a drunk. I'm not ashamed. Mama is from 1707. Mum is from 1823. Mummy, in this sense, is from 1839. Mommy, 1844. Mama, 1852. And Mom, 1867. And mastectomy, or the surgical removal of a breast, is from 1909. From Greek mastos, like masticate, burn. It's like the splitting of rocks or gems, from cleavage, to cut along a fissure line. I'm thinking about giving an account of myself. The stories do not capture the body to which they refer. Even the history of this body is not fully narratable, Judith Butler writes. Any effort to give an account of oneself will have to fail to approach being true. That's where I'm going to stop.
Let's see, technical testing. Okay, here we go. Emerson, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Let's see, I'm not seeing any questions here in the chat function. So if you don't know how to, there's a button, if you click on the chat, there should be a raise hand thing. Anybody would like to raise their hand, you can go ahead and unmute you, and you can ask Emerson a question directly. Anyone?
Oh, here it is.
Let's see, just scrolling through here. Okay, well.
If there isn't any, I'm totally happy to keep. Actually, you know what often happens when I do this is I just shared this the other day with some folks on the Instagram live that we had, but my only reading I was able to ever give prior to the quarantine time, I was at Goddard College where I teach and where I was a student. I finally graduated there after many years of trying to graduate from somewhere. And so it was really wonderful. They'd packed the room, and which is very rare during a residency. The whole school came, and I was completely honored by that. And then we asked for questions, and there were none. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. And somebody afterwards came up to me and was just like, it was just the way that you read it. Like there was nothing to say. And I'm still kind of, I don't really know what that means, but I've actually found that a lot lately. And maybe it's just our platform also, you know, that the Zoom and Instagram live stuff is like odd. But yeah, I'm also really happy for this text to just sit in the air and for it not to, you know, need a ton of explanation. But I'm seeing some questions. So with that
Yes.
said,
Yeah. 1 second. I'm going to do one thing. And then there we go. Okay. So that should do it. All right. Let's see. Tiffany, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and you should be able to ask Emerson your question.
Hi.
Gotcha. Hi.
You hear me okay?
Hi, Tiffany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I did send it through the chat because I'm a little shy, but I tried to raise my, I don't think it was seen. But as a memoir writer, did you find that you were reliving any emotions from the past? And if so, was that really difficult?
Thank you so much for asking that. Absolutely, I think there was a lot of reckoning that happened when I re-engaged with this subject matter. And at the same time, it was so cellular to me. Like, these memories were things that kind of jumped out at me all day long, every day, as long as I could remember, which, you know, I guess in a sense, like that's kind of what I was hoping to portray, was sort of the horizon of my being in a way, and how that horizon can be made up of all of these different sort of like scenes. And in a way it was surprisingly less emotive putting it down, just because I think that it was so familiar to me, these memories and this way of kind of thinking, so familiar. But certainly a lot comes up when I read it, even, and when I re-engage it. But yeah, definitely there's a lot to that. And for sure, I hope that there's an emotional quality to the text that is reflexive of my experience.
For sure. It's so emotional that I wondered how hard it would be to write that, because it just strikes you just like riveting emotion.
Oh,
It's so
thank you so much.
feeling. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm seeing another question here in the chat function. Let's see, El Napolitano, she writes, I love the idea of giving an accounting for myself. Can you say more about that?
Oh yeah, I love that. An account of oneself is a fabulous text that Judith Butler wrote, and that I really hung out with a lot for this book. And the idea basically that she lays out is that it's always failing, because we basically need another person to, like, first of all, the language that we, you know, use wasn't our choice, and the gender that, like, gender itself wasn't a choice. And when we're born, we're usually funneled through language and gender in this, you know, according to Butler, in this way, which I thought was a really interesting way of engaging selfhood conceptually, that I'm not really invited to selfhood in terms of agency. I don't know how much of an agent I am. Actually, I feel much more as if myself is collaborative, which is terrifying in some ways to think about, at least for me, that maybe I don't get to kind of possess an identity, that really it's sort of co-created with, like, you know, culture and maybe society, and we could, I guess, zoom out really big there. But in general, I'm sort of fascinated by the co-creative aspect of self, and, you know, how maybe it's not even that knowable. Like, we talk a lot about, like, how do I know myself? Yeah, and I just think of it, you know, as maybe much more ephemeral than that. So I hope that kind of comes across in this text. Thanks.
Definitely. Let's see, looks like we have William Crawford next. I don't know if we can unmute William here.
Hi, William.
Hello.
There he is.
So, my question is, like, this book sounded like, based on what you read, it sounded like it's come from something a bit personal. Like, is this based on a true story?
Yeah, it is, and it's autobiography, so it is true, and it is a mix of autobiography and theory. So yeah, truth is slippery, but definitely I don't even think in fiction, so I really struggle to do anything other than autobiography, which is kind of odd. I'm working on another book right now, and I was working on it today, and I was like, my gosh, it's like the same, like I'm just doing the same thing. And I know a lot of writers that I love that are doing that too. And, you know, I love the idea that memoir itself isn't just one account of one life. I thought that's what it was for a really long time, but I'm so grateful for all these writers who have explained to me through their work that life writing is the thing. And I can use like my subjective eye as a way to kaleidoscope through a bunch of different themes and stories and concepts throughout the course of my life as a writer. So yeah, it's true.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, folks. I think we have time for one more question. If anybody else wants to raise their hand or post it here in the chat box. Give a few seconds for that. You know, Emerson, I actually have a question for you.
And I'm also seeing, just so you know, I saw this, I'm seeing a chat, but I want to hear yours as well, but maybe we can do both.
If you're seeing something.
Yeah, because I actually saw this one earlier too, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think it was not a question. I'm sorry. I was just seeing a comment. And L is saying that it's no spoiler, but the dog, who is actually right here. I'll show you after. But I want to hear your question, Caitlin. Sorry I interrupted.
No. Just subjects as huge as identity and relationship to mother and these things that are almost hard to separate yourself from when you're trying to figure out who yourself is when did you think that you were ready to like sit down and write this story? Like, did something happen like that you were like, okay, now I'm ready? Or did you just wake up one day or like, oh, I have to write this? Like,
that's a great question.
Happened, that's totally cool.
No, I mean, you know what happened actually was grad school, which I am someone with like this long and tedious educational journey. So I don't think it's always odd for me to kind of give school the credit for this, but it did come from school, and I actually really appreciate schools, and I work in them, and I attended them, and so I'm very deeply appreciative. I think it can happen outside of school too, for sure. But I wrote Ghostbox, which was my first book, my first semester of an MFA program that I was in, and then I realized that I was doing everything in my human power to not write this particular book. And so a Ghostbox was like me sitting at a Kmart parking lot for 3 months to try to figure out this story of like a woman who was feeding birds there. It's a long story, but it was literally my attempt to like do anything else. I was like, well, I'll try like journalism again, because I was a journalist for a number of years, and I was like, how do I not write about myself? And it was kind of like what I was saying to William a minute ago, that like I didn't know it was okay to do this. And I appreciate what Melissa Phoebos writes about this a little bit, that she talks about when her students want to write memoir, that she notices a lot of them, particularly when they go to write about like moms or subjects about like that have any connection to the female or femininity or anything, that they're so afraid to be called narcissists. And she actually draws out she brings up the parallel between that and in her students, and then Carl Ove's phenomenal treatise, or like series, I guess, called My Struggle, and the empowerment that it seems that his way of making has, which I don't know is true at all, but that was what Phoebos said, which I noticed and have thought about a lot since I read that. And I think I had a similar anxiety. So I tried really hard not to write this, but basically little bits kept coming out, and I had really a wonderful team of people I was working with, and Maggie Nelson was one of them, who was like, you really need to just make this a book. And I said yes. But yeah, that's what happened. And it was very poetic for a long time. And I also had a really wonderful mentor named Mady Schutzman, who was like, please stop writing for obscurity's sake. Stop making this obscure. Like, just say the thing. And so that's what happened. So, and then I also just quickly also need to give credit really to the European Graduate School, which is, I ended up wanting to know more about theory, and I couldn't take classes at Occidental College, which was near me. They wouldn't like let me do it without like becoming a student, even though I just wanted to take some philosophy classes, because I wanted to know what everybody was talking about. I love theory, and I just wanted to know what was going on more. I felt like I didn't have that. So I went to EGS, and I got to work with Judith Butler. I got to work with Catherine Malibu, who's in the book as well. And so that was really quite helpful. So yeah, I bow in the direction of those institutions actually at this point, because they were just seriously helpful for me. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful to like give that credo to education and to schools and that those times. And isn't it a teacher appreciation week this week?
Is it? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Great.
So
that's awesome.
appreciate the teachers.
Yeah, teachers.
Yeah. Tiffany, I see that your hand is still raised on here. I just want to make sure that your question was asked and we're all good. If you could give a thumbs up or just any sort of indication that we're good, or we need to. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Thanks, Tiffany. Okay, folks. Just give opportunity for one more question if it's there, because I kind of took that last one. Okay, I think that's all we have time for, guys. Emerson, thank you so much. I am so privileged to be here this evening with you. I just would also like to thank you all for coming. This is our kind of inaugural run in our City Lights Live virtual series, so thank you for being here. I just also want to draw your attention back to the chat box. There is a link to bookshop.org where you can buy Emerson's book. Please go there. Bookshop.org, I'm just going to toot their horn a little bit. They're an amazing site that just launched in February, and they are providing an alternate web resource to the big box, a web retailer that will not be named. People usually buy their books at, but bookshop.org actually gives back money to independent bookstores all across the country. So please support them. They're supporting us. And just to continue on, our next event is tomorrow night, featuring Peniel E. Joseph. We're going to be celebrating his new book, The Sword and the Shield, the revolutionary lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. It's actually a dual biography. I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you again, guys. We look forward to having you joining us again. Please visit our website at citylights.com for future events. If you do miss an event, we're going to have these recordings up on YouTube, maybe edited a little bit, my face out of it. So visit us on YouTube, and then we're also going to have a podcast of the audio recordings up on SoundCloud. So that's all from me this evening. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Emerson, thank you.
Thank you.
It was really, really lovely.
Thank you. I'm grateful for all of you. Appreciate it. Have a beautiful night, everyone.